Welcome back, fight fans. Welcome back. It's time for another Q&A with the IBFP, so let's just dig right into it. Let's start with him, the Thone Boxing. How is Spence not a weight bully at 147 pounds if a fight with Canelo is competitive? And now that's a great statement. You know, a lot of people are coming out stating that a fight with Errol Spence and Canelo Alvarez would be a competitive fight. It would be a closer fight than most people will think. In my opinion on that, I think that Canelo would steamroll Errol Spence Jr. And I think that only reason why anybody would say it was competitive because of the size, because we all know that Errol Spence Jr. is not a natural 147 pounder. He's draining himself down to 147 pounds to fight smaller opposition. Errol Spence Jr. naturally belongs at either 154 or 160. That's typically where Errol Spence Jr. belongs. So, for him to be a multiple division world champion, it'll be interesting to see how he competes against those guys. But I think no doubt, especially since the fact that Errol Spence Jr. spars naturally against 154 pounders because that's where he naturally belongs, he is a weight bully for the 147 pound division. And I just have to be honest and unbiased about it. But let's keep going. One Flyboy states, Dillian Whyte lost to AJ. And Ortiz lost to Wilder. The logical fight for them is to earn a shot at the two belt holders. Okay, I can respect that. Why do you think Whyte is avoiding Ortiz, and do you think Manuel Charlo has backed him into a corner by refusing the fight? Well, let's start with this. I don't think Dillian Whyte is avoiding Ortiz because Ortiz has done nothing to make his name known. Ortiz is not a big draw, and he's not a world champion. What has Luis Ortiz done to make himself a big draw or a fighter that a guy like Dillian Whyte would even want to fight? It makes no sense. Luis Ortiz has no belts and brings no money to the table. So really, there's no benefit to fighting a Luis Ortiz. Luis Ortiz has a smaller name in the United States, but if Wilder's not a big name and he's bigger than Luis Ortiz, what's the real benefit of fighting Luis Ortiz? It's risk versus reward. But I see what you're getting at. Anyway, he continues on and states, basically, would you admit Whyte is ducking Ortiz if the fight isn't made after Ortiz basically pulled his card by accusing him of wanting to, I guess, get knocked out for a big payday by Wilder or Joshua instead of taking the fight with him and getting knocked out? I disagree. I don't think that he's ducking Luis Ortiz, but at this point, I see why a fight with Luis Ortiz would somewhat make sense because Dillian Whyte looks like he has no one else to fight at this moment. Manuel Charlo's not taking the fight. Dillian Whyte turned down an AJ fight. He's not going to get Wilder or Fury, so where else does he have to go? He's already beaten Derek Chisora. He's already beaten Joseph Parker. Where else does Dillian Whyte have to go? I think Luis Ortiz would be a logical fight, but if he doesn't take it, I don't think that means he's ducking. It's risk versus reward. Why take a more risky fight against a Luis Ortiz, one that does not benefit you at all, really, for the most part, because there's no belt, there's no huge payday. It would benefit Luis Ortiz more than it would Dillian Whyte at this point, and it's not a fight that Dillian Whyte has to take. Dillian Whyte has no reason to duck, Luis Ortiz, but at the same time, I can understand why that fight should happen at this point because it doesn't appear to be any other fights out there for Dillian Whyte. But let's keep going. Crazy D3 says, should the WBC order an interim title fight involving Dillian Whyte against either Ortiz, Fury, Kwanaki, etc.? I think the WBC should. I think that'll make more sense. At least we'll know that he'll be the next mandatory for Deontay Wilder. But the way the WBC works is that they take forever to call those mandatories. And when you see Deontay Wilder can continue to avoid Dillian Whyte forever, even though Dillian Whyte should be the actual mandatory over Dominic Breazeale, it is what it is. I think that would be great if the WBC did order that fight against an Ortiz, Fury, or Kwanaki, just to get that made. But I do think that would be a great thing. Billy Swanson states, is Tank Davis too much for Ryan Garcia, or is Ryan Garcia ready for a Tank Davis? I think that at this point, Tank Davis and Ryan Garcia, they're both unproven, but I think Tank Davis has proven a little bit more than Ryan Garcia. I think Ryan's age, his youth, the fact that he's still developing, the fact that he's very green, I don't think that he should be stepping in against a guy like Tank Davis, a guy who's already been world champion. He just needs more time to develop, work on his defense, work on his shots, and he's working with Canelo Alvarez's trainer, Eddie Reynoso, so I think he's improving fight by fight. He's already a big draw. He's already drawing eyes and, filling seats. So I think he's a very good fighter, but I don't think that he needs to be in with the Tank Davis as of yet. Great question. Francisco Cordova states Lomachenko versus Teofimo Lopez. Who wins? I think that's a good competitive fight early. I think Vasily Lomachenko, I have to give him the benefit of the doubt in that fight. Vasily Lomachenko is a proven elite level top 5 pound for pound fighter, and Teofimo Lopez is still somewhat relatively new and young in the sport. Although Teofimo Lopez shows a lot of great promise, and he not only knocks guys out, he puts them to sleep. So I think if anyone could challenge or, upset Vasily Lomachenko, I think a guy like Teofimo Lopez could do it. I wouldn't count Teofimo Lopez out, but I think that I would have to heavily favor Vasily Lomachenko to get the win. But we have to see more from Teofimo to see if he's ready for that level of opposition. Swiss Kids 316 states Zudo Ramirez versus Kovalev, and if Zudo could beat Kovalev, do you think he would become a big Mexican star like Canelo? I think it would help him along that road and along that path, but I don't think a Sergey Kovalev is the name to build that brand against. I just don't think that he's that big of a fighter to make Zudo Ramirez a superstar. Great question. Rudy Morales says, who's next for Danny Garcia after the Granados fight? I would think that Danny Garcia should be looking, for a title fight, ideally. And if you look at the fights and the way it's all structured, Errol Spence Jr. is choosing to stay in house. He's not really looking or checking for a Terrence Crawford fight. So if Errol Spence Jr. is not checking for a Crawford fight, Danny Garcia already turned down a Crawford fight. So no one ideally wants to fight Crawford on the PBC 147 pound division side. Keith Thurman is not going to fight Danny Garcia. He's looking for a tune-up, and he's also looking for a Manny Pacquiao fight. So once Danny Garcia is done, obviously the obvious choice would have to be, after Errol Spence and Sean Porter are decided, whoever unifies those belts, most likely will be Errol Spence. Then you can see that Danny Garcia, Errol Spence would be a fight to be made for later in the year. That would be my assumption. Although we would all like to see a Spence Crawford, I think a Garcia versus Spence will be more likely. Speak Your Mind Sports Talk states, do you see an immediate hate building for Teofimo Lopez? I understand that he's a bit arrogant, but so are many other young fighters. I feel that this is that his success along with his arrogance, but that seems to be rubbing fans the wrong way. My thing is his talent is undeniable, and I feel the hate starting to build up in the boxing community. What are your thoughts on Teofimo's hate? I don't think there's any reason for anyone to hate Teofimo Lopez. Teofimo is a top talent. He's a young guy, and he's shown tremendous potential. I do see a lot of people hating on him, but at the same time, I see a lot of people showing him love. Teofimo Lopez, that just means he's being successful when you start to see the hate grow. Great question. The next one comes from Immortal Fox. Where do you place Vladimir Klitschko in the heavyweight division currently? Is he competitive or better off retired? I think it's very competitive. I mean, with Deontay Wilder having so many fundamental flaws, with Tyson Fury, being dropped by Wilder twice in that fight, I think that that's nothing that Klitschko wouldn't be able to do should he get a rematch with Fury. There's a reason Fury avoided that rematch for so long. So I think he would immediately enter as being a competitive fighter. I don't think he's done, but at the same time, he stated that he's not interested in the comeback. Frankly Speaking states, what are your thoughts on Klitschko returning to boxing? Do you see him as a threat to the heavyweight division? Similar question. He stated that he's not interested in coming back at the moment, but anything can happen. Never say never. I think at the end of the day, Klitschko would be competitive, but I wouldn't put him at the very top. Eduardo Sanchez says Mikey Garcia versus Teofimo Lopez. Who you got? I have to pick Mikey Garcia. He's the more experienced fighter, but I wouldn't count Teofimo out as well. It's just that Teofimo needs a step-up fight, a fight that where we can kind of prove and gauge exactly what level he's on. So winning a world title will go a long way with me, but I think Teofimo Lopez could potentially beat Mikey, but at this point, I would still pick Mikey because he's the more proven veteran fighter. Bananas LOL 1 states, should Triple G fight Jermall and knock this bum out in the third? I think he should. I think that'll be a very interesting fight, but will Jermall fight him is the true question. I understand that Jermall might call for the fight, but will he actually commit to the fight and make the deal? That's yet to be seen. Justin Valdespino says, Josh Kelly and Joey Spencer, are they the real deal or hype jobs? I think it's too early to tell. Both of the guys look very good now. Early, Josh Kelly is a very interesting prospect, got very good height, reach, and skill set, but we just don't know. We need to see more from him to be proven. Eduardo Sanchez has another question, states Canelo Alvarez versus Jermall Charlo, Munguia versus Jermall Charlo, September 2018. He said, I'd like that fight next in September. I would too. I think that'll be a great fight. But at the end of the day, I do think that that's a plausible fight for Canelo and Jermall, and Munguia and Jermall, because, these are two fights that Oscar De La Hoya has specifically mentioned, and Canelo fighting 3 times this year. I'm sure that Canelo's not fighting 3 elite level fighters. He's going to take more of a tune-up type fight, and I think a Jermall Charlo would be that perfect type of fight. This is the type of fights that get fans excited, and I think this is the type of fight that makes sense. But once again, it's the Q&A with the IBFP. Please share, like, and you must absolutely subscribe.